So, look, my role now is to introduce Roger Jones. Roger's the CIO from Auckland, the CTO from Auckland Transport, and is going to talk to us about the integrated transport strategy and the digital strategy. He's seen the execution of a wide range of things in the Safe Cities initiatives. And interesting for me, he was also one who led the AKL hackathon, which was an opportunity to test how, if we share, what the consequence of that might be. So all good stuff. Roger.
Well, it's great to be here. I've missed out a couple of slides because I assume that you all know what Auckland Transport does. And if you don't, then we've probably got a problem. But we do lots of bits and pieces. And I guess why we're interested in smart cities, and smart cities is just the latest term for this sort of stuff. It was intelligent cities, and before that it was something else, and it will be something else in the future, no doubt. And the same with big data. You know, I always tell people, I've had big data for the last 15 years, it just gets bigger. And what's going to come next after big data? It will still be big data. But in terms of transport, look, we have a lot to do with smart things across the city. And this is a slide, like a lot of things I do, I rob them from overseas. So this is a slide courtesy of Cisco, which I've added to. And, you know, we do a lot of things, parking optimization, and these are all customer facing. They all have a direct impact on the customer. So, and who's the customer? Could be anyone. It could be the tourist, could be the tradesman, it could be a citizen, it could be a school person. Who knows? It could be one of our employees. So you've got to take a very wide breadth of who is our customer, where do they come from, how do you communicate to them? So parking is a good one, and we'll talk about that. Smart parking, we're about to roll out a new parking system in Auckland between now and Christmas that will give you parking availability on your mobile app. It will have sensors, you'll see where your parking is available in the city by street. Is it that smart? No, it can be better, but it's a start. So you look at that, traffic management, well, we've got a city that's in chaos with construction work. Traffic management is a big one. CCTV plays a part of that. Traffic light systems play a part of that. Are our traffic light systems good? They've been around for 15 years. You know, and when you speak to the vendor, they go, they're not up to it at the moment. They're spending $2 billion redoing it, but that's going to take 18 months. So in the meantime, we're living with an old, pretty archaic system. And I have very strong views about traffic lights, which my traffic engineers don't necessarily agree with. Public safety, that's a big one. What role does council play in public safety? Quite a big one. And I look at Fort Street, I look at O'Connell Street, Vulcan Lane, that area. New development going on around Chancery. You speak to the shopkeepers there, they go, people don't like coming up around those areas at night time. It's too dark, no safety. Some of those are new streets and they've got no smarts in them, zero. No CCTV, no ducting for it, high cost to retrofit because it's all concrete based. So you look at that and you go, that's not smart, that's dumb. What does a street look like in the future? What should we put in there to protect ourselves in 10 years' time? You know, even if it's only ducting now, if we don't do it now, someone has to go and retrofit it. And we all know people don't like it when you lay a nice brand new street and 2 months later you go and dig it up in order to put something in you forgot. So the council has a lot of this. It's about thinking. And I go, everyone in council has to challenge the old way of doing things. Everyone in AT does, and that's one of my roles in AT, is to challenge the status quo. Why aren't we thinking about what we should be doing in 10 years' time? What impact does that have on our streets? City lighting, we're rolling out something like 10,000 new lights, dimmable lights, LED, that will save millions of dollars a year. But on those poles, we're not putting weather sensors and all the other sensors that you can have. Why is weather important? If you talk to the Met Service, anybody can now forecast the weather for Auckland. Google can do it. Their business is about breaking it down to areas of the city. Why is that important to a transport company? You can't paint on a wet road, right? And you can't paint if the temperature is not right. You can't lay bitumen. So knowing which parts of the city you can work in each night is very important. That directly impacts jobs out in the third-party sector. Very important. Pollution. We drive a lot of diesel buses. You know, downtown people are complaining that they are adding to pollution. Do we know if they are or not? The answer is we don't. Because we don't have enough sensors out there. Because we're not being smart about it. We need to get a lot more sensor data. Transport optimisation, predictions of traffic, comes back down to, you know, when you're sitting at home in the morning, should you catch the train? Are you going to run for the bus? You know, it's all right walking to the bus stop on a nice sunny day, not so good when it's pouring with rain. What's your alternatives? How are you going to find that information or have it provided to you when you wake up? So there's a lot about the Internet of Things, 5G, that will enable all of this sort of thinking. That, you know, your alarm clock will go half an hour earlier so that you can catch the bus or cycle to the railway station or take your car and know where to park. That's a transport optimisation. It's not just about the back end. It's not just about how we do it better. It's about how you enable that out to the customer. And asset management. Every piece of infrastructure we build has to be maintained. Some of these fancy streets that are built by developers are very expensive when they get handed back to us to maintain. You know, stainless steel bollards are great until someone hits one and you've got to replace it. And it's a one-off unique design. Very expensive. So these things have to be thought about now because the impact is not going to be felt for another 4 to 5 years when the costs of maintaining those assets pass to council and AT and whoever else. And we've got to start thinking about how we retrofit standard things into there. And the one highlighted thing there in red at the bottom, the common data layer. Okay? We're very big about getting the data from our systems, making them available to the third parties. And I'll go through a few more slides on that. But the one thing I'll say is we can't do everything. We don't have the money, we don't have the horsepower, we don't have the intellect, and we don't have the capacity or the capability. We have to get others to do work for us. So you make data available. We made data available in February. We have now 8 public transport applications out there that we didn't build. All right? And that's with no publicity. So people will build things if you make the data available. It has its downsides, and you need to think about that. When you expose data, you expose the data quality. And if it's not good, it's very visible, and it will come back. So the bus systems are a classic. There are errors in the bus data. You build and put it out there, people are very quick to come back to you and go, hey, did you know the number 5 bus on this day, its data wasn't very good, and it's not been good for the week. That forces business process changes at the back end. The one thing we are doing is working more and more with council around shared infrastructure, shared networks, sharing data. So we've progressed that a lot more in the last 18 months than we have historically, and that will progress further. The same with NZTA. We're now very much embedded with NZTA about data sharing and working through how we get common data, common systems. So digital to us is a big one, and we've just written a whole strategy around digital, ITS and IT, and I'll just touch on that briefly here. This is our definition of digital. Everybody will have a different definition, and that's fine. And there's lots there. But this is the one AT's got, and it's all about customer choice, providing customer information, letting people make decisions based on relevant, timely information to them. It's no good giving them information that's old, out of date, things like that. So people talk about Google congestion, best thing out. Actually, it's 20 minutes old, right, at the best of times. So they only refresh their database every 20 minutes. If you look at their Google Transit, they don't have any of the walkways for Auckland in there. It takes them on average 9 months to put a new walkway in. So it's not that good, but people love it because it's what they're used to. So some of this is a trade-off between quality and what people will love and want to use. If you give them something they don't want, they won't use it. One of the reasons we looked at digital is how do we tie all this up? And we've been looking around for the last 2 years and gone, lots of companies have gone into digital. They've appointed digital officers and digital this and that. It's a new way of doing things. It is a new way of working. It used to be called Agile in the IT world. It's come back as a different name. Slightly different methodology, but it's exactly the same thinking. Short, sharp bursts, change the way you do things, fail fast. You know, if it takes more than 8 weeks, it's probably not a goer under a digital stream, which means from an IT perspective, you've got to run 2 streams. You've got to run the old way, the waterfall approach, and then a new way, which is try things quickly, fail fast. And that's what AT is going to do going forward. We've started up a customer central. We're getting facilitators in, and we're going to run those things based on 6-week sprints. And at the end of 6 weeks, we'll either have a product that we can roll out or we'll kill it. So it's as simple as that. And that product that you roll out might only be 80%. Don't care, it's good enough, and then you develop it iteratively later on. The days of getting the 100% good solution out there, they're gone. Nobody does that anymore. Intelligent transport systems. That's been around for years. That's really everything to do with transport, so it's pretty specific, but it's a subset. It clearly fits in the digital framework when you look at all the research around the world. So within our business, we've now structured digital sits within IT, ITS sits within IT, and it's now up to us to change the way we work and the way we're working with all our partners and the way we're embedded in the business. Because basically, as I sort of said, if you're trying to design a street, you can't do it without an IT input these days. You basically can't do anything in your business without involving IT. And if they're not there with you understanding your business and vice versa, then the thing starts to break down. And you'll fail in the long run. You won't deliver what the customers want. So this is another slide, Rob from IDC, but it's probably pretty appropriate to both council and AT. The digital journey. Where is everybody on the digital journey? Well, I've said we're pretty much down the bottom. We've got some stuff out there. We've got websites. We've got some mobile apps. We've got some data. Is it integrated across the transport sector? No. Do we integrate our data with your data? Not really. Do we integrate stuff with NZTA? Bits of it. So we're at the start of this journey. And there's a lot of opportunity here about this. And if we get this right, the public will love it. If we get this wrong, they'll always hammer us about we've done, things the old way, we're not responsive, we're not doing a good job. So this will lead to public perception. So, got to be led by the customers. Our whole customer central is we will involve customers in the upfront design of everything we do. So we're going to pilot this, but we see this even for the design of railway stations and things going forward, that we will get customers involved right up front about what they think about things and listen to their feedback. Because a lot of what council does, and I've been to some, and I'll go back to my example around O'Connell Street and things, I've been to some of those public meetings and I've heard what the people have said, and it just gets ignored. All right? It doesn't get reflected back in the plans that are presented at subsequent meetings. So I know how people can get frustrated. If people are going to be customer centralised, you have to listen to what they say. And you have to address every point they raise. Because if you don't, they just believe that they've been ignored. So that's what it's all about. And how do we do that? Some of it is engaging through social media. That's good if you're English, but to some of the earlier speaker points, it's got to be multilingual. WeChat is one of the biggest social media channels in Auckland. I don't think any of us actually use it. as an organisation. So that's because we don't have the capability, i.e. the people that speak that language. We're too scared. You know, I go back to my comms people and they go, oh, if I let 4 or 5 people in the business loose on Twitter, I don't know what they'll say. You know, they might say something I don't want them to say. But that's about empowerment. You've got to empower people and go, they're the younger generation, you've got to have a bit of faith. And yes, they'll make mistakes, but that's where the leadership, and you know, you're all leaders, you have to have a bit of faith in these people that they're trying to do the right thing. And everybody, even, you know, at our age, we all make mistakes. So we just have to accept that there will be mistakes. Open data. This is about making data available. As I said, we've opened up. We've now got 8 transport applications out there. It's great. We haven't publicised that. If I look around the world in transport applications, there's probably about another 6 or 7 applications that are already multiple cities. We're not there. I sent one an email and said, how about you join up our feed to it? And they went, where's Auckland? And so we obviously didn't get on that one, but we'll keep plugging away. But it's about, we've got to try and promote ourselves as well as a city out there and get onto some of these multi-city existing applications that have already been built. Because at the end of the day, a lot of our data is not unique. It's the same thing. Stuff coming off a bus is essentially the same stuff coming off in New Zealand as it is anywhere else in the world. I'm not going to go through these in a lot of detail. These are more for people to look at if the slides are available later. But we do have a lot of talent. You know, we've got a lot of talent in this country, and we've got a lot in Auckland. We did the GovHack. We've got MIT, we've got AUT, we've got the universities here. We've got people who are passionate about the city. These people will do things just because they want to and because they can. So it's about how we engage them, how we give them the tools, how we encourage them to do things that we want. So we're going down a new term called GitHub. GitHub is where you just put some information out as an organisation and you say, this is what we're looking for someone to do for us, and you hope someone picks it up and you offer them some form of reward if you think it's worthwhile, or a contract at the end if it's worthwhile, and if not, you just don't give them anything. It's reasonably successful overseas, hasn't been done in New Zealand. We're going to do it in the next 2 to 3 months. That's about getting people to do it for us at no cost. Networks. When you build a new subdivision, it's not just about roads and streets. It's about where the fire station goes. Where do you plan the hospital? Because you think, well, a fire station could go anywhere. It can only go anywhere if the roads are built right for it, if the traffic lights are in the right place for it. If you don't think about it afterwards, it's all retrospective. And you end up putting it in a less than ideal space. So we're about to go through a whole development area across Auckland. So it's about working with all these other agencies about how they're going to service that, as well as ourselves. And then maybe we can design a road network from an AT perspective that actually makes sense. And, you know, I've touched on this before, technology is all about enabling growth. As these suburbs get built, the developers can put in a lot of stuff. They can do it, and it's minuscule cost. We're talking to Chorus about, you know, joining up the fibre that they're running out the street. The cost to put in an extra duct for AT, they'll give it to us. It's so small in the scheme of things to them. But the cost of us digging up the road and putting it in for ourselves is huge. So it's about working with other organisations. And if we do it all properly, and we're all smart about it, and we all achieve everything, we will get a better experience for everybody, including ourselves, because we all live here. And we've all got to come to work. And we've all got to get home at night. And probably some of you are getting just as frustrated as us about the traffic delays. Well, here's your chance to do something about it, because everyone in this room has a role to play in that. And has a voice, and has an idea, and it's about how we capture those and leverage them, and empower the staff underneath us to make those changes. Because this AT can't do this on its own. AC can't do it on its own. Nobody can do this on its own. You know, and ultimately, from a transport perspective, and you won't see the detail behind this, but if you go offline, we might end up with a decent connected city from a transport perspective that gives people the right information at the right time and enables them to make the choice about what mode of transport. And it's not just public transport, it's walking, cycling, it's taxis, it's Ubers, it's things of the future we haven't even thought about. Now already the drone business around the world, what's that going to do to Auckland City when the drones start flying around? Who's going to manage that? Who stops a drone from flying into a crane that's been put up to lift something onto a building in the morning? Just a whole different perspective of the world to think about. But it's coming. So that's me. Thank you.
Right, so we have a few minutes for questions, and you may have noticed that the thing keeps going down. So every now and then I'm getting them printed out. But if you have been trying to ask a question on the app and you can't, then put your hand up and we'll make sure you can call it out. So we're taking questions to Jim and Roger about what they've been talking about or anything else you've always wanted to ask Jim or Roger. I've got a few for Jim up my sleeve. It's kind of called revenge. So before we get there, Jim, this is probably more your bag, but you may both be interested in it. There's a question about shouldn't we be putting trams or monorail up Queen Street?
I think that's yours, Roger, isn't it?
So, the light rail, the tram of yesterday, we pulled all those tram tracks out 30 years ago, before my time, thankfully, but never mind. Now we're going to put them all back. Do we need trams up Queen Street? They've got to go somewhere. If you look at Auckland, there's three key streets. Simon Street, Queen Street, Nelson Street. Simon Street carries today 140 buses an hour at peak down that road. The maximum you can travel is about 160 buses, and then you're down to about 4 kilometres an hour, which means you can actually walk faster than the bus can travel. So the logical step is you go from buses, you go to double-decker buses, which we've gone, which are higher capacity, but you can still only run so many buses down the road. Then you go to light rail, which carries about 1,800 passengers an hour down the road. A bus is about 1,400. And then you go to heavy rail. Heavy rail carries about 2,200, but you don't run heavy rail in a city. So yeah, you've got to put the tram somewhere, all right? And if you look at the designs, Queen Street, if you turn that into the likes of Melbourne with a walking shared space, it sort of works. And it sort of would look quite good, but it would mean the vehicles would probably have to be restricted to a single lane or get out of there completely and turn it into a true shared space.
Jim, I know you've got thoughts about the types of rapid transit and things like that. Anything you want to comment on that?
I know only that there's a lot of work being done on the type, and that's really, as Roger said, the Simon Street bottleneck and the bus interchange at the bottom of town, as I understand it, are the key drivers to have to change. But the opportunity is to run light rail or a rapid transit network through the isthmus, so Manukau Road, Mount Eden Road, Dominion Road, Sandringham Road, tight roads, and then down Queen or Simon Street or both. So a lot of work is being done on that. The business casing is a long and exhaustive thing, unfortunately, because it does need to be thought through well. And of course, I'm sure what they'll be doing right now is waiting to see what the final shape of the unitary plan is in terms of, because if you're going to do those sorts of rapid transit, you want to be sure that you can enable the community outcome you would expect from wherever they end up being. And so all of these things have to be congruent, or we're just going to end up with stranded, badly used assets or communities that don't thrive as you'd expect.
There's a question up there about Wi-Fi on trains. Is that coming, and if so, when?
So one of the train sets has Wi-Fi on it today under test. It will be coming. It's really just we're working through with the supplier, getting the kit onto the trains because they have to be train-specific equipment and certified and all the rest of it. But yeah, so we've got one train set up and running, and we've also got one train set up and running with, for want of a better word, advertising screens on it. And that's a different discussion. That's a cost discussion. They're not cheap to roll out, so you're talking probably $4 million to put the screens on every train. Wi-Fi is relatively easy.
There's a question here about can we just use standard international systems, or is Auckland too unique?
Everybody's unique, isn't it?
We're special.
We're always special. No, we use international standards. So we feed Google with a standard called GTFS. We basically use the European standards because they have more interconnectivity between their transport modes than the American standards. But if you look at the Internet of Things and vehicle communications, there's 3 standards, emerging standards: American, Asian, and European. And so which one's going to win? It's like the old VHS and beta tape discussion, which one do you bet your horse on?
There's a question here. The Queen Street issue was raised last year. What did we do about it? Perhaps whoever asked the question, if you could tell us what we mean. I don't understand the question, but if you want to, when did we raise it last year? And the 2 people apparently wanted to ask that. Okay, all right. Well, did I see a hand? No. We'll move on then. Why isn't AT publicly promoting its current apps?
I'm not sure why they're not, but as I said in my piece earlier, we've been working with a company in the US who, to demonstrate their platform capability, have developed some awesome apps, which Roger is working through now. I think the intent would be to once we've got to a point where we're ready to go fully widely live, that would be something we'd promote, because it's going to deliver some real-time information to the client base that they've not seen before to the standard. And I think Roger raised a good point earlier in his speech around be careful what you wish for when you expose your data out there. I agree with him, although I'd also say the sooner you get it out there, the community will clean it up for you quite fast if you release the right tools. But one of the things that's been interesting is the amount of work that's needed to be done to get the data to a state that the app could deliver what it promised. The technology was fine, but getting the data in that shape took a lot of work.
Yeah, and the other question, I don't know why we don't promote our apps that well.
Excellent, good. So there's a question here about why do we keep investing more and more in public transport infrastructure, but people are still using private vehicles? And the question goes on to talk about, aren't there things we should be doing more about how we price, how we charge, and those sort of other system things, the regulatory things. So a common issue is the pricing and regularity of trains and buses. How can we improve this before we try to expand? So I guess it's, rather than just providing more infrastructure, what else are we doing from a system point of view?
I think when you look at it, reliability is one of the key things. People will use public transport if it's reliable and frequent. That's the international research. We've seen that. So we've seen it with the trains by going to 10-minute services and putting in reliable trains. We're certainly getting a growth there, about 22% month on month of passenger growth there. The Northern Expressway with the double deckers on the dedicated bus lane, very successful. We're replicating that into Botany, and we're going to replicate that out west. So bus lanes do work. Interestingly enough, there's a lot of debate around letting electric vehicles into bus lanes. So if you look at Norway, which is held up, their bus lanes are fully congested with electric cars. So they have no better than every other lane on the motorway. So there's pros and cons. But it is about, you can't get people onto public transport if it's not there. So you've got to put the infrastructure in first, and then people will use it. If you advertise it first and it's not there, they never come back. And we've got a culture. People like their cars. That's the New Zealand way of life. You see that with the immigration and things coming in, it's different thinking. But the New Zealand historical is, I want my quarter acre and I want a car to go to work.
Do we collect data on Hopcard users? For example, the transport trends for different demographic groups. And when talking about that, can you address, which is something I'm interested in, the sort of ethical issues as well about what data we collect and so on?
So we collect lots of data from the hop cards. So we see where every hop card is used, so where it gets on and tags off. So we break that down by stops, we break it down by the type of card, because obviously there's super golds, adults, children's, concessions and things. So we have all of that data. And that's the first time we've had that sort of level of data. And that's really, really useful, because it then drives your marketing messages into those stops. So at certain times you can put different marketing messages up, i.e. no point advertising a rock concert at 9 o'clock when all the super goldies are going through it. But it might be more applicable at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the school kids are going through. So there's real opportunities there, and some of that is about how valuable that data is to external parties, and can we get a revenue return. And the privacy stuff, it's locked right down. So we anonymise all the data. And the privacy thing is interesting, because we also see people who use Wi-Fi on all of our stations and things, and how long they're connected and what they do. People don't realise that. The telcos also collected off every one of your phones, and they share us, not individually, but traffic patterns of who has gone to an event from which parts of the city. And if you're really worried about privacy, of course, you turn that off, because if you look at Google and you live out in the suburbs, you can see individuals' travel patterns. So it's a public perception thing.
Hey, look, our time has gone, so Jim, you're going to introduce the next speaker, but while he walks off the stage, why don't we thank Roger? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Roger.